Akallabêth, The Downfall of Numenor, Part 1. Now, before I get into the actual story here, I just want to get you up to speed on the timeline. Ever since the beginning of time and the creation of the universe, all the way up to the destruction of Beleriand, this is known as the First Age. So we've got the years of the lamps, years of the trees, creation of the sun and moon, to the destruction of Beleriand. All of that is the First Age. But now, in this part of the Silmarillion, we are in the beginning of the Second Age. So it's after the War of Wrath, and the evil men who fought for Morgoth have fled back east, where they encounter the people of the East who are just wandering aimlessly in neither service of the Valar nor of Morgoth. And the evil men bring with them the fear and the shadow of Morgoth, and they become rulers of all the people. And everyone dwelt in darkness, and were troubled by many evil things. And the Valar just kind of ignore them. But the Valar give a great reward to the Edain, the men who remained faithful and fought on their side. First, they give them great knowledge and a much longer lifespan than normal humans. They don't even get sick, they simply die of old age. They're also taller than normal, and their eyes become very bright. They almost look like elves. Second, the Valar raise up an island in the middle of the sea between Middle-earth and Valinor. The men set sail there, and it is just a paradise. It's beautiful and perfect, and it's specially made for them. They sail over from Middle-earth to this island, then they went up out of the sea and found a country fair and fruitful, and they were glad. And they called that land Anadune, which is Westerness. Numenore is in the High Eldarin tongue. This was the beginning of that people that in the Grey Elven speech are called the Dunedain, the Númenóreans, kings among men. Let's look at some of the geography of Numenor. In the west, we have the port city of Andúnie. In the middle of the island is the Meneltarma, the highest mountain in Numenor. This is where they set up a temple to Ilúvatar, and nearby is the city of Armenelos. And here the book mentions again how Elrond and Elros were given the choice to have an elvish life or a human life, and we know Elrond chose the elvish way, and Elros chose the mannish way. The Valar appoint Elros to be the first king of Numenor, and those in his line have lifespans that are considered long, even among the Númenóreans. Elros lives 500 years, and rules Numenor for 410 of those years. He goes by the title Tar Miniatur, meaning High First Lord. You'll see almost all the rulers use the prefix Tar in their titles. So the Dunedain, the Númenóreans, are living a great life under the protection of the Valar, and in friendship with the elves, who do visit them from Valinor, by the way. The elves occasionally visit, and they bring gifts with them, one of which is a tree called Nimloth. It is descended from Galathilion, a tree that Yavanna gave the elves of Tirion, made in the image of Telperion, though not directly descended from it. The Númenóreans speak Adunaic, which is their own mannish speech, but their kings and lords also speak Sindarin, and the lore masters speak Quenya, and they keep records in Quenya. The kings even take on Eldarin names, and they give elvish names to their cities. The Númenóreans become wise, and they are most skilled in shipbuilding and sailing. However, they're not allowed to sail so far west that they can't see Numenor anymore. That's the only rule, and it's called the Ban of the Valar. And its purpose is to keep the men from being too tempted into envying the Valars and the elves' immortality in the Undying Lands, this special place where men are not allowed to go. On clear days, however, from the top of the Meneltarma, some people can see in the distance Tol Eressëa. That's how close Numenor is to Aman. Anyway, the Númenóreans go all over Arda in their sea voyages. From the darkness of the north to the heats of the south, and beyond the south to the nether darkness, and they came even into the inner seas, and sailed about Middle-earth, and glimpsed from their high prows the gates of morning in the east. Wow, that is really far. Because remember how Morgoth was flung through the gates of night in the far west? Now these are the gates of morning in the far east. I mean, that's amazing. These guys really are the greatest sailors ever. Now, around the year 600, the Numenoreans also come to Middle-earth and meet the men living there for the first time. Things are, needless to say, not going well for those guys. They live in a kind of chaos. So the Numenoreans teach them how to plant and harvest grain, how to hew wood, shape stone, and basically just give their brief lives some sort of order. And little by little, the people who the Numenoreans help begin to grow happier and kind of shake off the shadow that Morgoth left behind. But the Numenoreans never really stick around for long because they always go back to Numenor. But of course, good things never seem to last in Arda, and the Numenoreans begin to wish that they could live forever. They also start to yearn for Valinor, which means they begin to resent the ban. And they start talking amongst themselves about this, and when the visiting elves hear this, they go and tell Manwë. This is around 2,000 years into the Second Age, so it's not like this happens overnight. This is very gradual. So, Manwë sends messengers who tell the Numenoreans, listen, you can't go to Aman. It's for your own good. You don't get to visit there, then come back here. That's not how this works. Ilúvatar gave you the gift of death, to leave the world entirely. The elves are bound to the world whether they like it or not. And the Numenoreans ask, well, we love the world too, but we have to blindly trust that everything's going to work out for us on the other side? That's not fair. And the messengers remind them that even the Valar don't know the mind of Ilúvatar concerning humans, and that Ilúvatar gave death as a gift to humans, a release from the weariness of eternal earthly existence. The messengers tell them that the only reason men fear death is because Morgoth planted that fear in the first place. And they tell the Numenoreans, the love of Arda was set in your hearts by Ilúvatar. He does not plant to no purpose. Nonetheless, many ages of men unborn may pass ere that purpose is made known, and to you it will be revealed, and not to the Valar. I mean, that's pretty amazing, right? You might be thinking, these Numenoreans better get their act together and be grateful for what they have now. Seems pretty sweet to live on Numenor and be destined for an eventual release from the weariness of living. Well, that doesn't happen. The king who receives the messengers is called Tar Atanamir, and he's the first king to speak up against the ban of the Valar, like openly. And he's also the first king to die on the throne. You see, normally the kings up until now have chosen to hand over their kingship to their heirs willingly, while they're still of sound mind. They don't die on the throne, they abdicate before they die. So this is an unpleasant little development. Also, the Numenoreans have begun taking tribute from the men of Middle-earth rather than giving things to them. And of course, many of the Numenoreans still want immortality, regardless of what the messengers said. So then Tar Atanamir's son, Tar Ankalimon, becomes king, and it's around this time that two political factions form. It's the King's Men and the Faithful, the former being wholly loyal to the king no matter what, the latter being loyal to the king but also faithful to the Valar and desiring to maintain a friendship with the elves. Over time, the fear of death grows in the Numenoreans, but they don't dare go against the ban yet, and it's during Ankalimon's rule that people start to neglect the Temple of Ilúvatar. Eventually, the Numenoreans set up permanent settlements in Middle-earth, not content with their own land anymore. They become overlords who rule the weaker men of Middle-earth, and they become greedy pleasure seekers rather than teachers and helpers of people in need. The members of the Faithful do not do this. They maintain a friendship with Gil-galad and establish a haven of their own called Pelargir, which you might recognize from The Lord of the Rings, and it is on the map. You might have forgotten about our old buddy Sauron. What has he been up to? Well, he went into hiding after the War of Wrath, and he's fortified the land of Mordor and built the Tower of Barad-dûr. He wants to rule over Middle-earth, but he hates the Numenorians partly because of their ancient alliance with the elves and the Valar, and partly because he thinks they're going to try to challenge him for dominion of the world. He doesn't challenge them openly yet, but it is said that 3 of the ring wraiths are actually Numenorean lords. Interesting, huh? Meanwhile, the shadow is growing and growing over Numenor. The line of the kings is starting to wane. Eventually, the 20th king, called Ar-Adunachor, outright bans the use of Quenya. Where have we seen this before? Notice how his title isn't in Elvish, it's in Adunaic. Anyway, things get really bad for the faithful during the rule of the 23rd king, Argimilzor. He persecutes them by forcing them to move closer to the capital city and by punishing anyone who speaks Elvish. Many of the faithful actually just sail to Middle-earth. The elves no longer come and visit from Valinor because the king has labeled them as spies of the Valar, and Manwë can see all of what's going on. So the Valar remove their protection from Numenor. The most honored house of lords after the house of the king are the lords of Andúnie, descended from the daughter of the 4th king. They are loyal to the king, but they also love the Eldar and the Valar, and they try to help the faithful where they can, although they don't declare themselves openly. Well, a daughter from this House of Lords is forced to marry the 23rd king, Argimilzor. Their older son, who eventually becomes king, is more like his mother than his father, and he takes the Elvish title Tar Palantir because he is far-seeing and wise. So he doesn't take an Adunaic name. He's kind of trying to restore order and faithfulness. He tries to appease and ask forgiveness of the Valar by tending the Temple of Ilúvatar and the White Tree once again. But no one comes from the west, because the majority of the people really don't feel bad about forsaking their duties. So his reign is pretty much marked by grief. Tar Palantir has a nephew called Pharazon, and this guy is a real piece of work. Pharazon sails all over. He joins wars that the Númenóreans are making with men in Middle-earth, and he is just really greedy and power-hungry. He's not a nice guy. And when Tar Palantir dies, his daughter Míriel is supposed to become queen, but Pharazon forces her to marry him against her will. Yuck. Numenor has a law against marrying first cousins, by the way, so this is not good, right from the get-go. But of course, he marries her in order to seize the scepter, which he does. He then declares himself King Ar-Pharazon. Stay tuned for part 2.